Hello, my name is Gene Monterastelli, and I am the editor of TappingQA.com. And the video that you are about to watch is an interview that I did as part of the 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping was a free event, which was a fundraiser for the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network provides training and trauma relief tools to those in war-torn countries, as well as working with refugees all over the world. They've been able to help out over 200,000 people all over the world. After you watch this video, if you find this video something that was useful, the very easy way that you can say thank you to the guest for giving their time and sharing their expertise is to go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support and make a small contribution to support the Peaceful Heart Network. Again, that is 24hoursoftapping.com/support, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Many of you know Dawson works for EFT Universe. He is a trainer. He is a facilitator. He's someone who is doing lots of research. Both David Feinstein and Peter Stapleton talked about the work that he is doing. The conversation that Dawson and I actually have is a really interesting one. It's a conversation that we pre-recorded it because Dawson is actually running a retreat this weekend, but it's a conversation about how EFT and meditation go hand in hand. And this is a conversation where we cover some really, really cool things that were an absolute surprise to me. So here is my conversation with Dawson Church on how EFT and meditation can go hand in hand. So one of the questions that I've been starting with lots and lots of folks over the course of today as we've been doing these amazing interviews is origin stories. Because I'm always fascinated by how people land in a place where this is a topic or something that they are interested in. So just as a background, as we kind of step into this conversation about tapping and meditation, how they work together, what is your history as a meditator? How did you come to meditation? Is it something you use regularly? Like, what does that relationship look like at the beginning, and what does it look like today?
Yeah, good question. And I think my journey is typical of many people. If you talk to people who are coaches, who are psychotherapists, who are in the healing field in some way, it often began out of a deficit and their own struggle and their own problems in their lives. And for me, it meant being 12, 13 years old and being what I now recognize having all the symptoms of PTSD, like flashbacks and nightmares and hypervigilance, and realizing I was just a wreck. In fact, in my book, Bliss Brain, I tell the story about how when I was around 15 years old, I happened to walk past a full-length mirror and looked at this person there. I had long, long hair at that time and was wearing bell-bottom blue jeans and a bag of books slung over my shoulder at all times. And I looked at my reflection and the words popped into my head, "That's the saddest face I've ever seen." And I realized I was just this tragic, disconnected figure. I couldn't relate to other people. I hated my life. I was suicidal. I just didn't want to be here. And so I wound up joining a spiritual community. And at 15, spent a lot of time in meditation. We learned the world's perennial philosophy, Aldous Huxley, Alan Watts, all of these great philosophers. And I did spirituality for a while, energy healing, energy medicine, but I didn't get much happier. I got a little bit happier. And I then thought, okay, spirituality is like not giving me that much traction of my own misery. Let's try psychology. It's got to be psychology. Let's do the mind. Right. So I enrolled for psychology classes, learned a lot, did a lot of psychotherapy, learned a lot of techniques, but found myself getting a bit happier, but not very much. But in the 1990s, I did Gestalt therapy, and I did a lot of Gestalt therapy workshops, and I began to make progress in some of my issues, but slow progress. Like if I made an inch progress in a year, that was really, really good. And I kept a journal since I was 15 years old, so I could tell if I was making progress or not. But then when I made the commitment at 45 years old to meditate every single day, I was in a real crisis at the time, midlife crisis, and I said, I'm going to meditate every day, no matter what. And I did. I began to do that. And it was painful to try and get up early in the morning and before my kids and I had to go to school and all the other responsibilities I had. But I did that. And then a couple of years later, I ran into energy psychology, then EFT, began to use EFT. And Gene, stuff that I made 1 inch of progress in a year with Gestalt therapy and was grateful to be making progress. Suddenly, I was making progress in a day
Mhm.
that had taken me months or years to make with conventional psychotherapy. And I was absolutely amazed at the results. I found myself becoming much happier and then hitting peaks of happiness, dropping all kinds of tendencies in my relationships and my dysfunctionality that had plagued me my whole life, which I hadn't been able to shake. And I began to change like that. And I challenge everybody who is listening to us today, just practice this.
Mhm.
Don't need any great persuasion or example or proof to do it. Practice it. You'll feel the shifts in your own life the moment you try it, and you'll keep on seeing shifts. Roll with those, keep on moving, and you'll find that even the mountains you didn't think you could move, you will find shifting in your life as you tap, as you meditate, as you apply these techniques in your life.
And so as you say that, I actually have right here my little checklist for my daily tapping. And for me, it's what my friend Pamela Bruner calls a process goal. It's not an outcome goal. The
Yes.
goal is to do the process. And there are days where I sit here and I do my morning work and like I'm walking out of here on Clyde 9. And there are other days where I do it and I'm like, really? I spent 10 minutes doing that? Okay.
Yes.
But it's that sum total persistence that really
Yes.
starts to move the needle in that particular way. And so it doesn't have to be the deepest issue, the most powerful tapping session ever. It's the daily piece of it that I've seen as well in my own life.
Yes.
And the willpower for me isn't enough. Thus, the reason why I give little check boxes and give myself gold stars to help me to stay on task, because my subconscious mind is a 6-year-old and I know I need to treat myself like a 6-year-old. So there are little check boxes and gold stars and giving myself high fives because that's the way I stay when I'm doing those particular things.
Here's your gold stars for today. Here's your high five, Gene. Here it is.
Excellent. Boom. Take it. Awesome. So then for you, what then, like, why does a meditation practice and tapping, why are those things that aren't just complementary to each other, but things that actually work in concert? Like, how have you seen that? Why do you think that works? What are ways that you integrate those two things together?
Yeah, and why doing either of them alone is not nearly as synergistic and powerful as doing them together.
Mhm.
And so meditation sets up a baseline of well-being in your life. And I really recommend that you do meditation in the morning. It's fine to do it in the evening. It stabilizes you before sleep. There are a lot of benefits to late meditation, but do it in the morning because in the morning, your delta brain waves and your theta brain waves are at peak. So when you go to sleep at night, our normal consciousness is beta brainwaves, pretty fast wave from 13 to 30 cycles per second means those neurons are firing 13 to 30 times a second. And that's our normal state of consciousness. We then, when we're falling asleep, drop into alpha, which is a slower wave, 8 to 12 cycles a second. And we sort of feel dreamy and drifty. We drop then into theta. We drop very quickly into delta. Delta is the slowest wave of 0 to 4 cycles per second. So our nerves are only firing at maybe 1 or 2 times a second. So now that slow neural firing is deep sleep. And we remain there for about 90 minutes. Then we have a period of maybe 5 minutes when we pop into theta. In theta, 4 to 8 cycles per second, we have vivid dreams. We then dream, and our brains are wiring like crazy. Our brains are wiring together in the memory and learning parts of the brain. In delta sleep, we're pruning, we're snipping away neural pathways we don't use. And so that's restorative. It prunes stuff you aren't using anymore. Theta sleep, you are having insights, dreams, and learning. And so that's a cycle. That's a sleep cycle we have all night long. When we are waking up, we're moving into theta, then moving into alpha, and then into beta. And if you meditate right at the cusp of moving into alpha, then you are able to capture a lot of that theta and delta activity, which is essentially delta is the unconscious mind, theta is the subconscious mind, and integrated with the conscious mind. So that's why it's so powerful to do your meditations in the morning. You also are then framing your day with that meditation in the morning. So morning meditation, and then you start the day in this inspired way. But then, Gene, as you and I know, you're inspired, you're feeling wonderful, you're feeling balanced. You then start the day and you get that email. And you get that phone call, and you read the news, and suddenly there's all this stuff that's just pulling you off the pedestal and dragging your experience down into the gutter of misery and conflict and problems to deal with. That's when you need something to restore equilibrium and get you back to optimism and joy, and that's tapping. So tapping is this way of getting yourself back to that equilibrium you established with meditation. So tapping is your transient stress reduction technique. Meditation is your foundational technique for a great day, and they work powerfully together. If you just meditate and don't tap, then you crash when you get into work and you just don't do very well, and the stresses get to you. And even if you're a strong meditator, by usually within 2 or 3 hours, you're finding yourself being dragged back into stress and overwhelm. But if you are tapping, then as well as meditating, then you are releasing that stress. If all you're doing is tapping, releasing stress, it's very worth doing. It's definitely great to tap if that's all you do. But if you don't meditate, then you aren't generating that substrate of well-being at the beginning of the day. You aren't framing your day in that powerful way. And so you miss out on all those benefits. And the benefits are absolutely mind-boggling of doing that meditation. So do the two together. And I also just want to say that we have an ethics component of our certification program. So if you're doing the ultimate EFT certification program, getting certified in clinical EFT, you will do a really robust ethics module, because we've seen people who say they're a coach, they're a therapist, they learn tapping, they then are getting much better results than they were before, and they say, wow, this is me. I'm a super coach. I'm a genius therapist. Look at the results I'm getting now. I've introduced tapping, and they don't ascribe it to the tapping. They ascribe it to themselves, and the egos balloon out. We've seen just some horrendous ethics abuses in EFT and energy medicine over the years with people who just don't have that foundation of meditation. So that foundation of meditation, of ethics, we really teach it. We require our practitioners to take a robust ethics training based on work by David Feinstein. And so we have them do that, and then they know about things like self-care, healthy boundaries. It's not me. It's not that I'm some kind of super coach. It's the method. And we tested this in studies, that it's the method. The EFT method, when properly applied, has consistent results regardless of practitioner. So the bad news is it's not you producing these results, it's EFT.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because conversation we had earlier in the day with David around some of this stuff, conversation with Craig Weiner around trauma-informed stuff, is all pointing to this place of this internal piece and how we fit into this puzzle and how we don't fit into the puzzle and what we're able to take responsibility for. The thing I find really interesting about what you're talking about is, like, for me in my business and coaching other business owners, one of the things people come to me for are for systems and organization. I'm not naturally organized. I'm not naturally that way. I'm super dyslexic, but I've had to create things so I can be successful. And the thing I say over and over again to my clients is, I do not create systems so that things go well. I create systems so that when they go wrong, my business is more resilient to those things going wrong. I think the exact same thing is true when it comes to our emotional state and our emotional resilience. Like, if anybody has been exposed to, an emotional scale, and there's all sorts of versions of them, we have depression at the bottom and euphoria at the top, is that the way I like to think about it is, when a life event happens to me, it's a plus life event or a minus life event. But depending on where I am in that scale, a minus life event is going to impact me differently. If I'm having a great day and a flight get canceled, then I'm a little bit frustrated. If I'm frustrated and my flight gets canceled, I drop into full-on rage because of where I am in that scale. And so what you're talking about here, where we're having meditation complement the tapping, the meditation is helping us to move up in a foundational way up that scale. And then the tapping is kind of dealing with the day-to-day fluctuations of that to keep us more secure in that spot, so that when things go sideways, because we live in a very human experience in a very human world, the resilience is coming through. And so I love the way you're talking about the foundational piece plus the emotional first aid, emotional management triage piece of it, and how they can work together as we navigate the day in that way.
Yeah, one analogy used by meditation masters and by various adepts, and which I share in my book, Bliss Brain, is the ladder analogy. And I asked a dear friend of mine, Andrew Viddick, who's a meditation master, what's the key to being in the highest possible vibrational state during your hour meditation in the morning? And he said, Dawson, the key to being in the highest possible vibrational state in your hour meditation in the morning is the other 23 hours of your day. And he likened it to a ladder. He said, you move up the ladder, the vibrational scale, the well-being scale, the happiness scale, the joy scale, the compassion scale, and then you're at this high space in meditation. And that's in the morning. But then between that and the next morning's meditation, how far down the ladder do you fall? Because that's where you start the next morning's meditation. And if you only fall 2 or 3 rungs down the ladder, then you're starting the next morning's meditation in a high place. If you fall all the way down into the ditch,
Right. Yeah.
then you're trying to climb your way up from the bottom again, and it's not very productive. So keeping yourself in that high vibrational state of love and joy and compassion and peace. And then when something bad happens and you fall down a rung or two, get yourself back up quickly. Don't give yourself 24 hours to stew and ruminate about it. Bring yourself back up the ladder quickly, and that way you'll preserve your well-being. All of your well-being comes from here. None of your well-being, beyond basic security, none of your well-being comes from out there. It all comes from your state of mind, state of consciousness, and that's entirely under your control. And one of the things in the personal growth movement is that most people are living at a level of well-being far below the level they could live at, Gene. And it just, when I do a live workshop or an in-person workshop or a virtual workshop, people share their problems with me. And often they're pretty well off in material terms. They're reasonably healthy and they have a job, they have shelter, they have a roof over their heads, they have food and water, and they have all these security things in place, and they're really unhappy. And my heart goes out to them. And I think, wow, they're living in this really miserable state, even though they have all of their physical needs met, and they could be in ecstasy every day. So many of us are living in this very small subset of our possibilities. And the human potential movement since the 1960s has focused on how do we claim our full potential. And meditation and EFT are literally, and this may seem like an exaggeration, but I really believe it, they're the 2 most powerful techniques we can use to bring ourselves to unlock that full potential. Are there other techniques? There are great techniques. I love yoga. I think Qigong's fabulous, grounding, time in nature. There are lots of other things we can experiment with and use to support our well-being. But the 2 essentials are meditation and tapping.
And as you share that, 2 things spring to my mind. The first is, talking about the sense of happiness. And there have been consistent studies that have shown that there is a correlation between money and happiness up to a very specific point. Here in the United States, where both you and I are, it's about $70,000. Right. Where up to that point, it actually does, because you're talking about these things about food security and not worrying about your next paycheck and being able to have a comfortable place. But once you get beyond that, then it becomes something else. And so recognize that those lower rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once they're met, then it becomes this completely other thing that we're stepping into. The other thing that I wanted to hit inside of that I think more people need to hear is you're talking about the fact that by doing these 2 things, when you get knocked down a couple of rungs, it's easier to spring back. Absolutely. What you didn't say is when you do these things, you don't get knocked down rungs. Right. I regularly have clients who have an emotional response to something, and afterwards, like, oh, I can't believe I got really frustrated in the moment. And I'm like, in the moment, it might be a proportionate response. If we live there, that's when it starts to become disproportionate. Like, it makes sense that when I lose my internet connection, I am frustrated because at this point, my clients are all over the world and I'm dependent on it to do the good work that I do. If I'm kicking my cat at the end of the day or I'm punching holes in the wall, so it's human for us to have those emotions because those emotions are information. And then we have a skill to respond back to it and step back up the ladder. And so I think it's really good to hear that we're not saying if you meditate and you tap, then the world is like rainbows and butterflies and cotton candy 3 meals a day. Like there's still the things that we encounter, but it's how we respond to that, which allows that particular experience to be different.
Yeah, and we have fewer things that get in our way and that we stumble over if we're doing these practices. It's really interesting that when we look at, there's a giant study done of meditators and meditation research in 2018. And some friends of mine were authors of the study and did the study. And they found that for people who are having that consistent spiritual practice, that are staying on a high rung, they have more synchronicity, more clairvoyance, more clairsentience, more things happen of just being in flow in their lives. So there actually are a lot fewer of those obstacles and many more of what they call anomalous experiences. Not really anomalous, every human being has them, but how many of them do you have? And the skeptics, the disbelievers, people who say that stuff's all woo-woo, they actually have a lot fewer of those experiences. So you actually predispose yourself because you're in flow with the universe. And in my book, Mind to Matter, I talk about the whole idea of being in a state of flow and also having your brain waves in sync. When your brain waves are coherent, your brain waves then become coherent with everyone else in the world whose brain waves are coherent. And also the in the tracking done of big geocycles like solar flares and the fluctuations in the Earth's field, our individual fluctuations actually start to line up with that. And there's some really interesting evidence for this, that we're now in tune, not with just with everyone else who's also in this coherent state. We're also in tune with the coherence of the planet itself, things like the Schumann resonances, frequencies which are in theta, the same as our subconscious mind, and other kinds of large planetary cycles. So your life just gets easier, more in flow. It's not like there's nothing bad ever happens, but your life is just, you feel you're in sync. You feel you're in the groove. Will you have challenges? Absolutely. Do we live in an imperfect world with a fluctuating economy? We do. So all these things can happen. And yet you have the sense of being one with the all that is, and then you're one in flow with those large cosmic cycles.
I have a mechanic friend of mine, and we were camping one time, and the generator went out, and he walked over to it and went, "Huh, that's interesting." And he's talking about the sense of, like, he was just in sync with the machines and was not overwhelmed or overcome by that particular thing. Obviously, something mechanical had gone wrong, but the way he was present, it wasn't that big of a deal, and he just stepped into it in that easy way. And as you're talking about, like, making it easier for us to see this stuff and connect in that particular way, about a decade ago, I spent an entire calendar year with one of those big pink erasers in my pocket. And every time I touched it, it reminded me my only work was to erase away the stuff that was in the way of being in sync in the way that you're talking about it. Yeah. So it's like it's our natural disposition, and everything that you're talking about here is how do we consistently and persistently access that natural disposition of how we engage with others, we engage with the world, we recognize things that look like coincidence and serendipity so that we can leverage them and make our lives better as we're tuning into them in that particular way.
Absolutely. And in my book, Mind to Matter, I talk about local mind and non-local mind. And local mind is all the stuff around us. Like right now, I'm looking at a postcard from my daughter who's visiting Scotland. I'm looking at my inbox. I'm looking at my phone, books on my desk. I'm looking at my local reality over here. We all have a local reality. And most people are embedded in their local reality. And it's fine. It's beautiful. I mean, most of our local realities are, again, you mentioned Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have all the lower rungs of that fulfilled in our local worlds. But I urge people to connect everyday meditation with non-local mind and have that ability to move into the equanimity and love and joy and compassion and gratitude that you find at those non-local levels. And then the generator does stop working, and maybe something does go wrong with your child or your parent or your work or your house or your finances. But then you are in that place of equanimity every day. And also what happens is creativity. I've just been talking to people who are doing work with me on in a new course we call The Short Path to Oneness, where we're collecting together a lot of the information from the world's wisdom traditions about how to move quickly into those states of oneness. And what they're doing is they're downloading creativity. I just talked to a filmmaker last night who just began doing this work a few days ago, and doing these meditations to stimulate that connection with non-local mind. And he just suddenly said, I couldn't believe it. In the last few days, I just sat down. It was like I got slammed by creativity, and I just began to write this new movie script. He's an Oscar award-winning director. And so he's suddenly unlocking a new level of creativity, but not from the local level, from the non-local level. So
Right.
if you cultivate your relationship with non-local, you again feel all that love, all that gratitude, all that joy. And then that starts to actually shape the local level of your life. You give to different charities, you spend time with different people, you speak differently, you have different interests, and a lot of things that used to really limit you start to fall away. So it's really powerful to both be in touch with non-local mind and the love it has for you, and the generosity of being and spirit and creativity it has pouring through into your local level. And most people, again, are so embedded in the local level, they're not spending any time in non-local. And if you just spend a little bit of time in non-local every day, just maybe a 15-minute guided meditation or a 30-minute time of silence or a walk in nature, suddenly you're attuning to those levels. And then again, you're moving yourself high up that vibrational ladder. And then at the local level, your life starts to become much easier and more in sync with that non-local well-being.
So one of the things I do every morning is I have a staff meeting with the spiritual posse who is journeying with playing with me. It's literally the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I'm like, okay, team. And one of the things I do, again, this non-local access, I actually assign them tasks. I say, this is a problem that I can't figure out how to solve. And it's not like, go solve the problem. It's like, maybe you can. And it's almost like this thing that's just constantly running in the background. But for me, just because of like the way I engage with my subconscious mind, and I'm trained in guided imagery and parts mediation, and I just like live in fairy tale physics. For me, it's, and I have no idea if there's actually this spiritual posse that I'm having a meeting with, but it creates a really lovely metaphor for me to consciously think about exactly what you're doing every single day. It's just team meeting. Okay, guys, team meeting. Let's deal with what we got to do. And it just sets the table to step into the day in a slightly different way.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill talked about that in chapter 15 of his book, Think and Grow Rich. And he was a consultant in the 1930s, and he had a group of clients that included people like the head of General Motors, Alfred Sloan, and other great business titans of society. And they would bring Napoleon Hill problems that they and their top minds have been unable to solve. And he would look at these problems and he would be equally unable to solve them. And what he would do was he would then go to what he called his invisible council. And he would meet with this group of beings, and he envisaged them as Thomas Edison and Abraham Lincoln and Marie Curie. And he had all this group of people who he would meet with, Muhammad and Jesus and Buddha and all of these beings around the table. And he would bring the problems to his invisible council. And he would then come out of those invisible council meetings with the answers, the solutions to problems that had eluded the brightest minds, again, at that local level of his day. So we find ourselves having remarkable breakthroughs when we do that. I know I write all my books from that place. When I was writing Mind to Matter, I would meditate for about 2 hours in the morning. I then walk over to my computer. I'd write for, on average, 10 hours. And then I'd have shower and have breakfast. Just downloading it. And people say, where do these books come from? Even science books. And often you'll find Albert Einstein said that every great scientific discovery is made in an altered state, like Napoleon Hill was saying. He got his theory of relativity in a dream. All kinds of other scientific breakthroughs happened through imagery, through being in that relaxed alpha state, moving to theta and delta. That gives you access to the wisdom of the universe. You don't get it with this busy thinking mind. We need the thinking mind, but often the thinking mind is just thinking repetitive thoughts, doing repetitive behaviors, and leading us in the same path we were in before at that lateral level. We need to, I forget who said this, but he said that the thinking mind is a wonderful servant and a terrible master. And we have to get out of it and move into non-local and then live in that space and then bring that inspiration into our local worlds.
And as you say that, it's not just scientific discovery. It might be a apocryphal story, but it would be pretty if it was true. Keith Richards tells the story from the Rolling Stones that he had a guitar and a tape deck next to his machine in the middle of the night. He'd wake up and he'd just record stuff really, really quickly, and he wouldn't know until the next morning what he got. And Rolling Stones' satisfaction, the primary line from that, he woke up in the morning and he found it on this tape deck from this altered state in the middle of the night, where it was just like he trained himself to wake up in the middle of the night and just noodle because there was some piece of inspiration that was there, and then go back to bed, and then in the morning would figure out, oh, is that worthwhile, or if it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you're listening to us now, to Gene and I giving you practical examples. Gene is going and talking to his posse. I love that term, Gene. I'm going to borrow that and use that as well, the posse. So, and Napoleon Hill's Invisible Council. And so I'm just addressing the people who are sharing this time with us, Gene. What are you doing to build your relationship with that source of infinite information, that information field out there in non-local? Are you bumping along and using your own best efforts, your lateral mind and beta brain to try and do that? Or are you tapping into the riches and wisdom of the universe that I can assure you desperately wants to give you its gifts, and is just waiting for you to take that time in the morning to sit there, get quiet and calm enough and unplugged enough from your daily local reality to tune in and receive it? There's a wonderful Sufi saying. They say, the gods come down from heaven every morning at 6 a.m. with their arms full of baskets of gifts for humankind, and they leave again at 7 a.m. with their baskets still full. And the idea is that people just aren't tuning in to the bounty that's coming to us from the universe, from non-local. So what I'm challenging you as someone listening to Gene and I dialoguing right now is to make a commitment to, in your life, doing what it takes. For me, when I began to meditate at 45, meditate every day, I had to get up at 5:30 a.m. to do that, which was really hard for me to do. But I set my alarm clock early and just did it day after day after day. Now I love waking up at 5:30 a.m. and accepting the baskets of gifts from the universe. But what might you do? Will you schedule that time for self-care? Will you listen to those guided meditations? My guided meditations are all over the web, and they're free. They're on apps. They're on websites. You just can't, just type in guided meditation, Dawson Church. You'll get a flood of them you can use, and just they're free. Use a guided meditation. Use a meditation app. Use something, and give yourself that little gift in the morning, and that is that time for you. But don't just be inspired by what Gene and I are saying here. Have an action plan. Translate this inspiration into an actual plan, a commitment you will make. I said every day, 5:30 meditation. That might not be right for you. What is right for you? It's something. Don't let this moment go by without taking action.
And one thing I'd love to talk about and get a little feedback on is like it from the other side of someone who has a consistent practice. So you've said things like, I do it for an hour. It starts at 5:30 in the morning. Like, and one of the things that happens is like our lives are full. And so taking a really full life and then finding 7 hours or finding 5 hours if you're only doing it weekdays, like that is as a beginning, just like going from 0 to 5 hours or 7 hours a week is a difficult thing for the human experience. So like practically, you gave a bunch of examples of simple things we could do practically this week. What could be a simple plan for someone who is thinking about introducing this in, so we're not worrying about a lifetime, but they can have 5 or 7 days of success? Because one of the things that we're finding with goal setting is that if you set a goal that has a time frame set to it, it's a significantly easier goal. It's not, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to get up and run every single day. It's for the next 14 days, I'm going to run.
Yes.
And that's a manageable goal because there's an end and I can do it, which is different than the life sentence of running every single morning. And God, I hate this. And how am I going to put myself through this? So if someone was going to set a 7 or 14-day goal to integrate into this, what would be a simple thing that they could do for those days?
So write it on your calendar. And again, I recommend meditation. But for example, I use a Google Calendar, and there are Outlook calendars. There are other calendars as well, virtual calendars. And you simply, when you set your time for meditation, And again, make sure it's at a time when you have that time available. So if you do have to start your kids getting ready for school at 6:30 a.m., it might be 6 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. or whatever it is. So add it to your Google Calendar for tomorrow, and then it says, do you wish to make this a recurring event?
Mm-hmm.
And you click yes, and it'll ask you often, and just make it every day, every weekday, or every day. And then you'll have it on your calendar. That's a concrete thing you can do. Now, if you think 7 hours a week is too much time, let me tell you why it's no time at all. It's actually going to give you more time. In the research that I share in my book, Bliss Brain, we look at the productivity of meditators. And the ability of meditators to solve complex problems and be creative. Like that movie director I mentioned, movie producer, who suddenly began to work on a new script after just a few days after he began that regular meditation practice. Research by the Defense Advanced Projects Agency, DARPA, shows that people who get in these flow states have a 5-fold increase in their ability to solve problems, complex problems. So imagine that the biggest complexities in your life, now you have 5 times the amount of power to solve those. Other research shows that people's productivity goes through the roof. Their creativity more than doubles. Imagine if your creativity doubled, your ability to solve complex problems went up 5-fold, and your productivity went way up. That hour or half hour you're spending in the morning is actually your highest leverage point of your whole week for being productive. You actually cannot afford not to meditate.
And so as you do that, again, like set a goal and work your way into it. And the other thing I think is really important when we're setting new goals is to give yourself permission to be gentle with yourself when it doesn't go exactly right. Again, the goal is the framework to help you to take action. The goal is to be more emotionally resilient and access all the stuff Dawson is talking about. The goal is not to meditate every single day. The meditation is a tool. The tapping is a tool. It is not the goal. It is the thing that produces the goal that we want as we're navigating this.
Yes. And again, tapping is also, I mentioned tapping throughout the day to return you back to that baseline of well-being. I also strongly recommend you do the personal peace procedure, because that is tapping not reactively to what's going wrong during the day. It's tapping proactively on what went wrong in the rest of your life. And so the personal peace procedure, it takes about a month to really dig into it. We have a new program on our website, a new online program, which takes you through it really easily. And so the personal peace procedure is going and making a list in your journal, and we recommend a special peace procedure journal of all the bad stuff from the past, and then tapping on a few of those things every day. So maybe you write about bad things that happened when you were 3 and 5 and 7 and 9 years old, and you may have a list of hundreds of things in your life. If you have 1,000 things and you tap on 3 of them a day, after 1 year, you've tapped all 1,000 of them down to a low number. So now you're using EFT not reactively to deal with the stresses of today. You're using EFT proactively to deal with all the traumas of yesterday going back through your life. So do the personal peace procedure, and that then clears a lot. And so meditation is your path to elevated states. EFT is what clears trauma. What we find if people meditate and hit these high states and don't tap, don't clear trauma, is that they go through a dark night of the soul, and it often stops their spiritual growth, or if they dissociate from their traumas to go to those high states. I mean, there are spiritual masters who are going to high states and who are abusing their students. I mean, there's a lot of abuse in the spiritual community. It's because they haven't cleared trauma. That's why you absolutely have to go and do both. When I joined that spiritual community when I was 15 years old, what they told everyone was, oh, we know you've had all this chaos and all these problems in your past. All you do is transcend them. You move to this elevated state where they don't exist. And research shows that that is completely 180 degrees not true. You absolutely have to go and heal the trauma. If you don't, if you try and stay in those elevated states, it becomes spiritual bypassing. You aren't dealing with those things in your life. So go do the personal peace procedure, clear your past, then you go to those elevated states, and you don't go through the dark night of the soul, or develop that huge shadow self that will hold you back.
It's kind of like getting in a hot air balloon, but forgetting to untie it from the ground. It doesn't matter how much upward force there is, that thing is still going to hold us grounded in that trauma that we have experienced. We've navigated all of that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Well,
go ahead. Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, just in the last 5 years, there have been horrendous scandals. I mean, we all know about things like the pedophile priests in the Catholic Church. There's been a big scandal now in the Southern Baptist Church. There's been a huge scandal in Shambhala Buddhism. There have been people going to jail for abusing their students. So again, all these people, and some of these are brilliant, evolved masters,
right.
And yet they didn't do the tapping. They didn't take care of the trauma. So it's absolutely essential to, as Jean says, to untether the balloon, to go and just clear all that ground below the balloon that otherwise would be pulling you back into those states.
Awesome. Well, Dawson, thank you very much for giving us a little bit of your time and not only your insight, but your personal experience. I love hearing not just things that we can do, but from a point of view where we recognize where it's coming from. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, you can get into these absolutely amazing states of bliss and then stay there, spend most of your life there. And I so want people to know that it's possible and have the tools to get there. And Jean, I'm so grateful for you for providing this wonderful 24 hours of tapping to let people actually have the experience that'll help them move to that space and let go of all those rocks tethering their balloons to the ground. Thank you so much.